whether that person is local or foreign. As long as you own property in Trinidad and Tobago, you have the right to the enjoyment of that property. That's an economic right. And there's also a right, the right of a parent or guardian to provide a school of his own choice for the education of his child or ward is a social right. But that is included in the Bill of Rights because the state is of the view that it has the capacity to ensure that each person or parent or guardian has the right to provide a school of his own choice for the education of his child or ward. All right. My dear friends, there are those who will come to you and say to you that there are certain other rights that should be in the Constitution. The right to health care, the right to housing, the right to a job, and so on. And these things will sound correct to you, and you will say, well, yes, that sounds right to me. That should be in the Constitution too. But there is a major pitfall associated with doing that. They fall under the economic and social rights, which rather than being included in the Bill of Rights, normally is included in the preamble to the Constitution. And what the preamble is all about is a statement of the values to which the society aspires, the values of the society. And let me tell you what the current preamble says. The current preamble talks about the acknowledgement of the supremacy of God. That's a value of the society. Faith in the fundamental human rights and freedoms. The pivotal position of the family in a society of free men and free institutions. This is the preamble. The dignity of the human person. All of these, my dear friends, are the values on which our Constitution is based and the society is operated. The natural entitlement to equal rights for all persons as members of one human family. Gets away from considerations of race, class, color, creed, and all those differences. All are members of one human family. That's a value enshrined in the preamble of our Constitution to which we all subscribe. Respect for the principles of social justice. Belief in a democratic society, including due respect for lawful constituted authority. And last but not least, listen to this one, recognition of the principle that men and institutions would remain free only when freedom is founded upon respect for moral and spiritual values and the rule of law. You remember that? The president was on very solid ground, my dear friends. Was on very solid ground when he talked about moral and spiritual values, because what he was in fact doing was referring to a value as outlined in the Constitution, a value which we all agree is a value to which the society ought to aspire and subscribe. My dear friends, let me draw a hypothetical case to your attention. Let us assume that we accept the view that the right to housing should be included in the Bill of Rights. So we put it in as a fundamental right. And 10 years from today, somebody goes before the courts and says to the courts, I have applied for a house 5 years ago and I don't have any. That violates my fundamental right as enshrined in the Bill of Rights of the Constitution. And then the judge asks the government, well, why is that so? And the government says, as is the case today, that we have built 32,000 houses already, but we have a demand for 120,000, so we have 90-something thousand more to build before we can deal with the issue, and that we are building houses at the rate of 8,000 per year. So we say that to the courts. And then the judge says, and this is a hypothetical case, my dear friends, and then the judge says, well, no. You shouldn't be building houses at the rate of 8,000 a year. You should be building houses at the rate of 12,000 a year. The judge says that. And if the judge says that, my dear friends, then the government now must carry it out. But what in fact that is the judge getting involved in the decision making that is reserved for the legislature. It is by the legislature, by the parliament passing a budget that we determine the rate at which we can construct houses or spend money. And therefore, if you put the right to housing in the Bill of Rights, what in fact you are doing is you are inviting the judge to get involved in the work of the legislature. And you remember what Montesquieu had to say about that? Montesquieu said that there would be an end to everything. There'd be an end to everything. And the basic principles of democracy will no longer hold, and has been described in another place. You can get what some describe as the tyranny of the judge. Now, it's a hypothetical case. The point I am making, therefore, is this: that as correct as some of these things might sound, to put some of these things as rights, some of these social and economic rights as rights in the Bill of Rights of the Constitution, we run the risk, my dear friends, of disrespecting the sacred principle of the separation of powers as between the judiciary, the executive, and the legislature. So that is something we mustn't do. In the Constitution, therefore, that is to come, we have to be very careful how we expand the Bill of Rights. What the PNM prefers to do, my dear friends, what the PNM prefers to do is to put some of these values in the Bill of Rights. And as we are certain that the state has developed the capacity to properly discharge some of these rights, they can move from an aspiration and a value of the society to a fundamental right to which the people are entitled. You understand me? That is the Bill of Rights. That is the preamble to the Constitution. Very, very important. Things that people pass over, my dear friends, but things that are very important to us. My dear friends, the Constitution goes to great lengths to protect the fundamental rights of our citizens. It goes to great lengths to protect that. And the way it is done, these are enshrined essentially in sections 4 and 5 of the Constitution. And if you wanted to bring any law in Parliament that impinges on these fundamental rights in any way, you can't pass it with a simple majority. Normally in Parliament, if we are to pass a law, it is passed with a simple majority of those present and voting. But the minute that law has implications or begins to impinge on the fundamental rights of our citizens, then you can only pass that with a minimum of a 3/5 majority, not of the members present and voting, but a 3/5 majority of the members of the particular house. In the case of the lower house, there are 41 members, but the speaker is from outside of the house, so there are 42. And in the Senate, there are 31 members. One of them, a government senator, being discharging the functions at this time as president of the Senate. So that it is 3/5 majority, and depending how serious it is, it could be 2/3 majority, or if it is really fundamental and dangerous, it is a 3/4 majority. So that the rights of our citizens are protected by the Constitution itself, so that Parliament cannot go and just trample on those rights. But if you want to bring a law that affects those rights in any way, there must a certain minimum number of votes that you must get in the Parliament to be able to do that. More than that, the structure of our Senate, my dear friends, is one which ensures that the government does not have a majority. And as it is now constituted, the minute you want to talk about legislation that impinges on those fundamental rights, you must have the support either of the opposition or of members on the independent benches. They are independent of the government, my dear friends, and therefore their votes are votes on which the government cannot depend. They will only vote for the government, ladies and gentlemen, if the government is able to convince them of the rectitude of the government's cause. It is a check and balance that guarantees the fundamental rights of our citizens. In the case of a 3/5 majority, in the lower house you must have 26 votes. In the case of a two-thirds majority in the lower house, you must have 28